14 shocking and unbelievable school rules only found in North Korea. Step into the bizarre and almost unbelievable world of education in North Korea, a place where schools are not just about learning, but function as factories for shaping absolute loyalty. Here, every glance, every gesture, even your thoughts, are closely monitored. The rules are so strange and extreme that they might send a chill down your spine, from banning public displays of affection to forcing students to memorize speeches by the country's leaders. You wouldn't believe how odd and unsettling these rules are until you see them in action. Imagine this: a typical school day where you're not just doing your homework, but also taking part in leader worship ceremonies, mandatory labor, and even standing before the whole school to publicly criticize yourself. These rules don't just limit personal freedom, they completely crush it, turning schools into places where students are molded into perfectly obedient citizens. Get ready for a journey full of surprises and shock as we dive into the 14 strangest, creepiest, and most unbelievable school rules in North Korea. Rule 14: the brainwashing political classes. Now picture yourself as a young child, barely old enough to say hello, and yet you're already being forced to memorize revolutionary slogans and songs praising the country's supreme leaders as if they were gods. In North Korea, this isn't some exaggeration, it's a fundamental part of the education system. Every day, millions of students attend mandatory political classes where they're relentlessly fed propaganda. These classes aren't just about history or politics, they are rituals that glorify the leaders Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong Il, and Kim Jong Un. Students don't just learn about these leaders, they are required to memorize every detail of their lives and accomplishments. It's so ingrained that they can't imagine a day going by without hearing their names. And here's the kicker: these political classes are considered more important than any other subject, including math, science, or literature. From the time they're in kindergarten, kids are taught to memorize slogans like "Long live the great General Kim Il-sung," slogans many of them probably don't even fully understand. These rules aren't just about building loyalty to the regime, they're about eradicating free thought. The goal is to stifle creativity and critical thinking. In North Korea, education isn't just about learning facts, it's about shaping people who blindly obey. These political classes have become a symbol of the regime's control, where every aspect of a student's life is supervised and directed. If you think these are just normal school lessons, think again. They're more like brainwashing sessions, where anything that doesn't align with the party's ideology is considered unacceptable. Critics argue that these classes are a form of intellectual imprisonment, smothering students' ability to think for themselves and locking them into a narrow, unchallenged worldview. Rule 13: strict dress code. In North Korea, one of the strangest rules students have to follow isn't about political lessons or discipline, it's all about how they look. In a place where every student, no matter their personality, is forced to follow a rigid, soulless dress code, individual expression is completely wiped out. The school uniform isn't just about clothing, it's a symbol of absolute control. Students are required to have dull, short haircuts and pale faces with no makeup. Boys can only have short hair, and girls aren't allowed to dye their hair or wear makeup at all. Even a small violation like growing your hair too long or secretly dyeing it can result in public punishment or forced labor. Schools in North Korea enforce these rules mercilessly, seeing them as a way to maintain a collective mindset where everyone must conform to the same standard. Any sense of personality, creativity, or personal expression is erased, leaving classrooms full of students who all look the same. The tiniest freedoms, like picking your own hairstyle or adding a little color to your face, become totally out of the question. For some, this feels like a terrifying imposition, a drastic way to control every little detail of students' lives, turning schools into machines that crush freedom and individuality. Rule 12: no food from home. The state controls every bite. Imagine a school day where you're not allowed to bring any food from home. Whether it's your mom's homemade soup, a warm baozi, or just your favorite fruit, everything has to be left behind. Why? Because in North Korea, food isn't a personal right, it's a tool of state control. Students have no choice but to eat the government-approved meals, basic rations that are handed down from above. But it gets even more extreme. If anyone dares to waste food by not finishing their portion, they face harsh punishment. To the state, this isn't just a simple act of disrespect, it's seen as a sign of disloyalty. Even a leftover spoonful can be used as evidence of rebellion, tiny details that make you a target. It's not just about food, it's about the state controlling every small aspect of students' lives, ensuring that everything serves the party. The meals students are given aren't about health or variety, they reflect the country's limited resources, where scarcity and uniformity are applied to every bite. Food isn't a reward, it's a reminder of the state's power, to the point where even personal food choices are strictly controlled. You can't pick what you want to eat, and that's not just a lack of freedom, it's a deliberate effort to erase any trace of individuality in a society that's been carefully molded into a well-oiled machine. So why such a rule? It's all about reinforcing the state's power, making every bite a symbol of complete submission. In this system, you're not just a student, you're a small part of a massive machine, where even what you eat is under control. Rule 11. Creepy collective activities. In North Korea, students don't just hit the books, they're also forced into creepy, collective activities where every step, every look is controlled. These activities go way beyond regular schoolwork. Students have to participate in after-school labor, working in collective farms, cleaning public spaces, or marching in grand parades where leader worship reaches its peak. These activities are marketed as building collective and revolutionary spirit. But in reality, they're just a form of ideological brainwashing designed to create citizens who never question or doubt. These experiences aren't just about maintaining order, they're about instilling absolute obedience from an early age. Many outsiders believe these activities are the North Korean regime's way of locking down the minds of its citizens, turning them into obedient cogs in a massive, perfectly functioning machine with no room for individual thought or freedom. Rule 10. No romantic relationships allowed. In North Korean schools, the idea of teenage love is not just discouraged, it's completely forbidden. Even the smallest hint of affection, like a furtive glance or a secret smile, can lead to severe punishment. The government sees personal feelings as a threat, a dangerous distraction that pulls students away from their education and their unwavering loyalty to the state. If a student is caught showing affection, they might face expulsion or, even worse, public humiliation. Teachers, whose job is to monitor every move, are required to keep a close watch for any signs of romantic feelings. This oppressive control doesn't stop at academics, it stretches into the most private emotions, stifling any kind of youthful desire. Critics argue that this rule shows just how far the regime goes to control every aspect of life, so much so that even the most natural, innocent feelings are censored without mercy. In this world, there's no room for innocent crushes, only strict discipline and blind obedience. Rule 9. The walls of control. No leaving school grounds. In North Korea, school is more than just a place of learning, it's the first prison for every child. Students aren't allowed to leave the school grounds, not even for a few minutes. Imagine a place where stepping outside for fresh air requires permission. That's the reality in North Korean schools. Any violation of this rule could lead to severe punishment. Why is this rule so strict? Simple: total surveillance, absolute control. Schools aren't meant to be spaces where students can explore or socialize freely, they're meant to be places of constant surveillance. Every move is tracked, even something as simple as stepping outside during lunch or recess. Why? Because the regime doesn't want students to be exposed to any outside influences, whether it's people, ideas, or behaviors that challenge the state's narrative. If you want a moment of freedom and fresh air, you need permission from a teacher or school official. If you don't get it, you'll face harsh consequences. Imagine living in a space where every step, every moment of downtime is monitored, where you're essentially living under house arrest, all in the name of safety. These children have no freedom, no choices. This isn't an educational system, it's a form of brainwashing, where students are only allowed to learn what the state wants them to, think what the state tells them to, and live in a box with every door tightly closed. And the restrictions don't stop at academics. Students' personal space is also stripped away. Their basic right to move freely, something most of us take for granted, has been reduced to almost nothing. What happens if you break the rules? You're punished or detained like a criminal. In a society where everyone is under constant surveillance, even the slightest attempt to step out of line can be seen as an act of rebellion, something the regime simply will not tolerate. It's hard to imagine living in a world like this, where freedom is completely suffocated and every move you make is controlled. Every action is scrutinized and fear of being watched is a constant, inescapable part of daily life. Rule 8. The dark curtain. No access to the outside world. In a world where information equals power, North Korean students are trapped in a dark cage, cut off from the rest of the world. No internet, no international news, nothing. Instead, they are fed a diet of government-approved content, all carefully edited to praise the regime and reinforce official ideology. Foreign books, TV shows, and movies are strictly banned. Any hint of foreign culture can lead to severe punishment. All they're allowed to read or watch are textbooks and documentaries that perfectly align with the government's narrative, where every word, every image has been carefully controlled. This strict rule builds an invisible wall, isolating young people from the outside world and ensuring they only see things through a heavily distorted lens. Critics call this mental imprisonment, locking students in a world of knowledge that's incomplete, biased, and narrow. It creates a generation that has no idea about the diversity of the world or the truth outside the walls of their closed-off society. Rule 7: Forbidden languages, the outside world as a myth. In a world where language is a powerful tool for expanding one's understanding, students in North Korea face a chilling reality: they are forbidden from using foreign languages. Even though they are taught English and Russian in school, they are not allowed to actually use these languages outside the classroom. It's a suffocating rule that creates an invisible barrier between students and the outside world, locking communication with the rest of the globe behind closed doors. So why does the North Korean regime fear language so much? Because language isn't just a means of communication, it's a window into the world, a way to learn about ideas, cultures, and philosophies that exist beyond the regime's control. Every word, every sentence structure in languages like English or Russian doesn't just represent knowledge, it represents an entryway to other worlds, to ideas that could challenge the power and dominance of the state. Because of this, students are only allowed to memorize vocabulary. They are never permitted to practice or speak any foreign language, not even in their personal lives at home. The level of language control in North Korea is chilling. Students may know a few basic words in English or Russian, but they are never allowed to speak them. Picture being a child who not only is deprived of the opportunity to communicate freely in these languages, but is also carefully monitored if they even dare to utter a foreign word. It's as if they are blindfolded to a huge part of the world, a world where these languages are tools for connection, communication, and exploration. Using a foreign language in daily life is seen as a serious offense, a potential threat to the regime, a sign of betrayal that could be severely punished. This is not just a rule, it's a form of brainwashing. The regime doesn't just restrict information, it controls how people think, how they connect with the broader world. When students are robbed of the ability to communicate in international languages, they become like prisoners, trapped in a narrow, isolated worldview where the state's story is the only one they know. The idea of being locked in a language ghetto, with no access to diverse ideas or perspectives, is almost impossible to fathom for those who have grown up with the freedom to speak and think as they wish. With this rule, North Korea doesn't just limit education, it cages the mind, making it impossible for students to understand global cultural values, ideas, and progress. It's a strategy of isolation, where every possible contact with the outside world is erased and students are left in the darkness of ignorance about what's really happening beyond their borders. Rule 6: Loyalty under ritualized pressure. In North Korea, political rituals are not just events, they're high-pressure moments where students are forced to publicly demonstrate their absolute loyalty to the regime. From grand parades to birthday celebrations for the leaders, students cannot be absent. These are seen as their patriotic duty. During these events, students are expected to perform in perfect unison, singing songs of praise for the leaders and listening to speeches that glorify the greatness of the regime. Behind the grandeur of these occasions, however, many recognize that they are nothing more than relentless brainwashing, drilled into children from a young age. Events follow one another in an unending cycle. Class time is cut short and personal time is stripped away. To outsiders, it looks like an endless round of mandatory ceremonies, a way for the regime to prevent free thought and ensure that loyalty remains at the core of every student. Rule 5: Slaves to the propaganda dance. In North Korea, students are not just children sitting in classrooms, they are essential tools in the grand, tightly orchestrated public spectacles, all closely monitored by the regime. The colorful parades, endless rehearsals, and mandatory chants in praise of the Kim family leaders become a fundamental part of their lives. Week after week, they must perfect synchronized movements, where every gesture from their eyes to their words is meticulously controlled by the state. A single misstep can have consequences that reach far beyond the individual, often affecting their entire family. Behind the dazzling lights and loud music of these propaganda events lies a painful truth: students are reduced to mere instruments serving the inhumane propaganda machine of the regime. Their precious time is stolen, dragged into a dance where education and the future seem to have no place. That ugly reality is concealed beneath the glittering surface of mass gatherings. Rule 4: The psychological inquisition, terrifying self-criticism. Envision a place where personal freedom is nothing more than a distant dream, where even the thoughts in your head cannot roam freely. This is the reality in North Korea, where self-criticism sessions are an integral part of school life. Here, every student is forced to participate in these harsh reviews, standing before their peers to beg for forgiveness for mistakes they may not have even committed. Anything you have learned, any questions you've asked, even the briefest thought about injustice can become a crime, and in that moment you cease to be yourself. Students must confess their failures, from not studying hard enough to daring to question authority. These sessions are not just a form of self-reflection, but a psychological battle, where every glance from peers and teachers feels like a sharp blade, cutting into your self-worth. And what's even more terrifying is that if you stop criticizing yourself, if you cease to confess your wrongdoings, you will become a target, isolated and cast out from the group. These self-criticism sessions are not simply about admitting mistakes, they are a form of mental torture, a chance for others to scrutinize you, condemn you, and strip away your sense of self. The fear in these sessions doesn't just come from confronting your own faults, but from the anxiety that you could become the target of a thought-policing witch hunt, where everyone is encouraged to report on one another. It's a system of self-surveillance where trust no longer exists, only confusion and a constant, haunting fear of being exposed, criticized, and condemned. Perhaps nowhere else in the world does fear and pressure strip away human dignity in such a brutal way. In North Korea, confession is not an act of repentance, it's a high-stakes game where every word you speak could be the one that destroys you. Rule 3: Brutal control, when art becomes a weapon of the state. In North Korea, creativity has no place. It is suffocated, stripped away before it even has a chance to grow, erased like a potential life force. Students are not allowed to create art freely, they cannot write their own emotions or paint their own dreams. The pens and brushes in their hands are not tools for self-expression, but instruments for painting slogans, glorifying the leaders, or creating propaganda-filled artwork. In North Korean art classes, instead of learning to be creative, students are forced to follow a rigid template portraits of the leaders, always with their cold, steely gaze reaching up to the sky in every stroke. They are taught to draw stiff images, with no space for imagination, no room for personal feeling. Every creation must adhere to a singular framework, serving the regime, serving the worship of those in power. Creativity is considered a crime here. Any form of self-expression, whether it's a note of music, a line of writing, or a brushstroke, if it does not serve the socialist ideals, is deemed an act of betrayal. A single stray thought, an idea that does not conform to the regime's standards, could result in students being denounced as enemies of the state. Their world is not one of creativity and innovation, but of a mental prison where beauty can never exist outside the limits of control. This regulation is not just about denying creative freedom, it is a full-scale brainwashing campaign, a brutal act of stripping individuals of the opportunity to be themselves. This society does not just want to control outward actions, it wants to infiltrate the very essence of each person, ensuring they can never see the world through their own eyes. This stifling system not only prevents students from developing their artistic talents, but it also robs them of the chance to discover their own identity. These individuals will grow up not knowing who they really are, only knowing one thing: they are tools to serve a massive machine, where every image, sound, and feeling must conform to a pre-drawn ideological map. We are left to wonder what kind of future exists for those who are not allowed to dream, not allowed to create, and not allowed to own their own lives. Rule 2: Agricultural labor to support the state. A day that never ends, where rest, study, and sleep are mere strangers. That is exactly what the students in North Korea are being subjected to. They are forced to participate in agricultural labor programs from dawn until late at night. After long, grueling hours of classes, they head straight to the fields, sweating under the scorching summer heat, plowing and pushing heavy carts with not a moment to rest. And that's not all. The rare breaks are disrupted by weekend labor sessions when all the children, exhausted, just want to lie down and rest. The truth behind these programs is not about learning or development as the government claims. They are about tight, suffocating control, invisible chains that steal away the time students could otherwise have for themselves. Each day, these children sacrifice their childhoods to grueling agricultural work, preventing them from pursuing personal interests and denying them the chance to dream of the bright future that children in other parts of the world get to envision. Can anyone grasp the true cost when a child has no time to think for themselves, is not allowed to dream of simple pleasures like playing with friends, or even an English class to expand their worldview? These labor programs are not simply an intrusion into the lives of students, they are part of a sophisticated system of control that stifles freedom and destroys innocent dreams. How can you ask a child to be tireless when their world is limited to endless fields and oppressive, monotonous days? Rule 1: the ban on personal expression. In North Korea, there is a peculiar yet frightening law, the absolute prohibition of personal expression. Within the walls of the schools here, thoughts have no value unless they adhere to a specific mold. You might hear low murmurs, whispered complaints, but they are only echoes of fear. The freedom of thought is stripped away in the classroom, where every question, every debate is closely monitored and controlled, like birds trapped in a cage, unable to fly beyond the set boundaries. There is no room for independent thought here. Students are not allowed to argue, not allowed to question the government's policies. Any signs of critical thinking are immediately extinguished, like a flame snuffed out in the dark. Lessons are not meant to encourage creativity, they are meant to drill obedience, to train minds that only know how to repeat the regime's teachings. Devotion to the regime is taught as a sacred belief, unquestionable, unchangeable. And if someone dares to think differently or voice an opposing opinion, the consequences are not merely cold stares from teachers but can escalate to severe punishment, from failing grades to public reprimands. Disobedient students will face brutal retaliation, where not only they but also their families will suffer. A harsh blow, like a knife stabbing at their self-worth and their freedom. This world, where freedom of thought is under daily threat, does not just kill dreams, it destroys the ability to think independently. With each passing day, these minds become dull, unable to recognize themselves, like shadows silently drifting through an endless maze. They become citizens who no longer have the capacity to question the government, no longer able to ask themselves why their rulers act as they do. They know only obedience, only repetition, like puppets being pulled along, unaware of the strings. And what happens when an entire generation loses the ability to ask questions, dares not dream of a different future, and can no longer discern right from wrong? Surely we will face a world where freedom is a myth and the truth is nothing but the lies taught in classrooms. So we have embarked on a journey through the confining walls of an educational system, where every nook and cranny is monitored and every thought is censored. From the hours of indoctrination in political ideology to mandatory public demonstrations, all of it is aimed at one singular goal: to turn each student into a perfect machine for the regime. Can we imagine a life where creativity, freedom, or even an independent thought is forbidden and punished? For students in North Korea, this is the terrifying reality, a place where all traces of individuality are erased beneath the velvet cloth of blind obedience. This regime, with its harsh and imposed regulations, has shaped a generation that knows nothing of freedom, nothing of peace, nothing of dreams that soar high. They know only absolute submission, with no right to voice their opinions, no right to think differently, no right to understand the truth of the world outside. And when we look at that picture, can we stand idly by? Can we turn our backs on such a world? Should you choose not to turn away and wish to delve deeper into the terrifying truths this world confronts, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss out on any vital updates. Leave a comment below and share your thoughts on what we have just uncovered together. Thank you for following, and always remember, the truth is the most powerful weapon.